I'm going to try and move through this piece right here. This was published in Insight a couple months ago. I've had some people urging me to deal with it. The title is Moving Forward with the United Methodist Church, What's Changed and What Hasn't. It's written by Taylor Watson Burton Edwards. He is a denominational official for the UMC, even though he's not United Methodist. He's not a stupid man. He's a very intelligent man. I've appreciated his contributions at some points, but I would be comfortable saying he's an ideologue. I would say that whenever it comes to issues of progressivism, he does not have the moral qualms that I do with misconstruing what has been said and done. He has been engaged in gaslighting people like me for a long time. I'm certain in saying that he would see people like me and most of you as bigots who need to be brought kicking and screaming into the future, and that what they did in the UMC, even though it might not have been done perfectly all the way along, it was done for a righteous cause. He's 100% on board with that. So this piece was written in order to kind of gaslight people who are acting, what the impression you get is there are people running around screaming, oh, they changed everything. They got rid of the Bible. They changed all their doctrines. It's a satanic group now. And he's saying, look, the differences aren't that big. They're making a mountain out of a molehill here. And so while there have been people that want to overstate the case, I still obviously think that the changes they made were so grievous as to justify leaving. So that's kind of the tension here. He's probably smarter than me. He knows a lot more than me in different areas, but this is one of those black and white things, I think. So we'll do our best to walk through. So let's skip down a little bit. Major changes that did come out, he acknowledges. One, the denominational budget for the upcoming quadrennium was reduced by 43% over the previous 8 years. In real dollars terms, annual conference budgets are reduced because of this reduction, plus the loss of revenue from disaffiliated churches. This also means that reduced services will be available at every level, as conferences and general agencies are cutting staff and programming worldwide to function under reduced budgets. For most general agencies, the budget cut is 52.8%. To my knowledge, that's all true. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that. The key phrase is over the previous 8 years. They've done this more gradually than, to my mind, was responsible, but at least there's some kind of responsiveness, I think. Should be point 2 then, I think. The disaffiliation process was discontinued. The Judicial Council has also not nullified annual conference separation plans. That's true. It remains to be seen. I'm drawing on notes that someone else wrote for me, by the way. I'm not going to pretend to have all my own thoughts here. Remains to be seen if annual conferences will continue to allow for local church disaffiliation or separation under previous conference processes that were already underway before Judicial Council nullification. So, for instance, Mississippi is maybe going to continue this forward anyway. And then whether or not annual conferences develop new processes that they contend are not in violation of Judicial Council Decision 1512, or enter into individual behind-the-scenes case-by-case negotiations. So if you listen to Lonnie Brooks, he makes the case, look, no matter what they do up there, conferences are going to continue to negotiate with individual churches that want to go. All denomination-wide policies treating homosexual people differently from heterosexual people were ended. That's a semantic game right there. My side has always contended they're treated exactly the same. We're all held to the same moral standard. There's one group of people. There's only one person that you can rightly have sex with. It is your spouse of the opposite sex. That's it. Gay people are held to the same standard as everybody else. Gay people, I categorically refuse that way of talking. It's just the language. People who have same-sex attraction are held to the same standard as everybody else. But what he is saying is their identity is that they're drawn in a certain, sexually attracted in a certain direction. They have been outlawed from acting on that, whereas straight people have not been. Now we're just making it so everybody can act in the direction that they're sexually attracted to. That pretty quickly falls apart whenever you have sexual orientations that are not constrained just to gay and lesbian. So what's happening right now is the slippery slope where you try and let some people in or some behaviors in, but not others. So and this is where it's all going to fall apart. I mean, already this is the main problem with this is they want to act as though they can just normalize a little bit more, and you don't open up the door to polygamy and polygyny and thruples, uh, sexual interactions with animals, sexual interactions with children or people of a certain age. Right now, they're trying to just open the door a little bit and say, okay, you can do this stuff that was traditionally seen as not good, but no more. But as we're going to see, the language is not there to limit that very well. It's very subjectively or culturally determined. There is nothing that's stopping the floodgates from opening now. 3, the social principles revision process begun in 2012 was concluded with the adoption of revised social principles. There's no mentions of the word of homosexual or homosexuality. Marriage is redescribed to allow it to work under the marriage laws of all countries in the UMC. For the first time, the social principles include clear language against child marriage and polygamy with guidance on how to deal with each where it occurred. So that's all true. There's hardly anything that's just outright false here in what he says. And to be clear, the GMC and our Book of Doctrines and Discipline still doesn't have anything about homosexuality. All this stuff deals with cultural norms that we want to insist upon without corresponding with specific language that highlights any specific behaviors or identity groups. And I think that that's a mistake on both parts. I think it's intentional in the UMC so they can say, we don't say anything plus or minus. So Nigeria, you should allow us to be a legal entity there because we don't say we're pro-gay people. We don't say anything about gay stuff, which is dishonest because a lot of this, you have to see what came before and what came after, or what's currently in place. So I really appreciated Absalom Nuhu. He had a segment he did on the internet where he just went through the old Book of Discipline language and the new Book of Discipline language, and he's got both books right there and he's going through them. The changes that were made indicate a clear accommodation to Western understandings of sexual orientation and behavior. And so that's what he's going to say in this next bit. And well, before I go on, I don't want to, he says for the first time, social principles indicate clear language against child marriage and polygamy. That's true. Yeah, sorry, I took that off. That was right here. And what I'm saying is, well, what I haven't said yet is the United Methodist Church for a long time hasn't cared what they have in writing. They've disregarded what was in writing. So to imagine at this point that they're going to care about what's in writing is silly. They're going to have the right thing on paper that they need to appease as many people as possible, going in the right direction. But to imagine that there's going to be a check on that when they haven't even been able to keep polygamy in check all the way along, well, let's just go on because this continues to kind of frustrate the senses. We affirm human sexuality as a sacred gift and acknowledge that sexual intimacy contributes to fostering the emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being of individuals and to nurturing healthy sexual relationships that are grounded in love, care, and respect. Human sexuality is a healthy and natural part of life that is expressed in wonderfully diverse ways from birth to death. I would just say the vast majority of sexual stuff you can do will drag you to hell. And I find this characterization of human sexuality a problem. It is shaped by a combination of nature and nurture, heredity, and genetic factors on the one hand, and childhood development and environment on the other. We further honor the diversity of choices and vocations in relation to sexuality, such as celibacy, marriage, and singleness. We support the rights of all people to exercise personal consent in sexual relationships, to make decisions about their own bodies and to be supported in those decisions, to receive comprehensive sexual education, to be free from sexual exploitation and violence, and to have access to adequate sexual health care. So there are a number of things that are coded in there, actually, and he's speaking a little out of his depth, I think. But, I mean, the first thing, entering into the nature versus nurture thing, it's always funny to me whenever Christians engage in that as though they are the experts at the forefront of this. But it's also besides the question. It doesn't matter how natural something is. Sin is natural. That doesn't make it okay. So that's beside the point, and it continually just frustrates me that people think that that's a valid thing to argue about in the church. Whenever it talks about, in particular, consent, where was that? Personal consent in sexual relationships. That is part of the new sexual ethos that is prevailing in the West, which is as long as both or all three or four parties consent, it's okay. And that is a problem, first off, because then you have people for the last 150 years openly in the West saying, well, you can consent when you're 16, you can consent when you're 14. So the boundary line of consent, if you leave, this is what the scriptures say, and we're going to obey the scriptures, then there has to be some other ethos, some other rationale put in place, and one is consent, and that easily leads to all kinds of things outside of the bounds of marriage. Sexual education. This is something in the West where we want to, in the public education system, tell children about themselves sexually. This is otherwise known as grooming. It's been shown not to be effective at all in preventing pregnancy and spread of STDs. Meanwhile, it does effectively spread an ideology of normalizing sex outside of marriage and depravity more generally. And if you want to argue with me, you look up the stats first before you argue with me. And then whenever it talks about adequate sexual health care, that's code for abortion. Child marriage. We reject marital relationships with children and youth under the age of 18, even in places where such relationships are culturally or legally permissible. Child marriages and premature sexual activities disrupt the normal course of emotional, biological, and social development of minor children. That's such a weird thing to say. For underage girls in particular, premature sexual activities and the pregnancies resulting from such activities can permanently damage internal organs, lead to lifelong medical problems, and preclude other opportunities in their lives. Waiting until a more appropriate age to wed offers better opportunities for children and youth to grow into healthy adulthood and become full contributing members of society. We therefore believe that young people should be of legal age to give their consent. So you see, it's not, here's the biblical principle, it's here's what modern health says, which I'm not even sure how real that is. Anyway, my main concern is just going to be right now, the game that the United Methodist Church has been playing for some time is there are certain people who want power. And what they're going to do is, in the name of empathy, lift up some group of people that seems innocent enough if you don't look too prolonged at them, and then continue to alienate other people so that they still look holy. But right now, I mean, what I would put to Taylor Watson Burton Edwards and others in United Methodist leadership is, how dare you cast aspersions at MAPS, minor attracted persons? This is something that they can't help. They were born with it, okay? It's a combination of nature and nurture. It's a sexual orientation, every bit as legitimate as gay and lesbian. And who are you to judge them, okay? These are people that deserve happiness. They're reaching consent in their sexual relationships. They're honoring the people that they're with. They're using the gift of human sexuality that God has given them. You hypocrites, how dare you allow gay people and lesbian people in and then block other people out? Polygamy. We cannot endorse the practice of polygamy, which entails living in relationship with multiple spouses. Nonetheless, we acknowledge that the forced dissolution of such relationships presents significant problems. All too often, the women and children forced out of polygamous relationships find themselves cast into abject poverty with no means of support. We therefore urge church leaders, when dealing with the dissolution of polygamous relationships, to exercise the utmost care and to prioritize considerations related to the continued health and well-being of dependent women and children. We reject attempts to ostracize families who are or have been in polygamous relationships, especially women and children, or deny them access to the ministries of the church, including participation in the sacraments. Instead, we urge pastors and congregations to extend the same gracious welcome and hospitality to those in need. So if you notice, there was only one sentence about it. We cannot endorse the practice of polygamy. That's it. And then the rest is, don't make these people feel bad. Don't make them do anything uncomfortable. That's pretty much it. And then, the table is open to everybody. So let everybody come forward and feel like they're right with Jesus, even whenever they are blaspheming his name in their households and their sexual lives. Just as a contradistinction to that, here's an article. We're not going to go through it, but no old wine in the new wine bottle. Reverend Kula cautions global Methodists. This is in Liberia, by the way, but this is a native African, Jerry Kula, who I've interviewed, a fantastic person. But he's making clear on the front end with the GMC that there is not going to be any room for polyamorous relationships. He's been saying or polygamous relationships. He's saying in the UMC, y'all got away with it. You're not going to get away with it in the GMC. We're going to require sexual holiness on your part, which, man, that's great. Let's look a little bit more at this article, and then we'll change. Yeah, there's not much left. Qualifications for ordination. Paragraph 304.2 as revised. Point 2, for the sake of the mission of Jesus Christ in the world and the most effective witness to the Christian gospel, and in consideration of the influence of an ordained minister on the lives of other persons both within and outside the church, the church expects those who seek ordination to make a complete dedication of themselves to the highest ideals of the Christian life. To this end, they agree to exercise responsible self-control by personal habits and that are conducive to bodily health, mental and emotional maturity, integrity to all personal relationships, fidelity in marriage and celibacy and singleness, social responsibility, and faithful sexual intimacy expressed through fidelity, monogamy, commitment, mutual affection and respect, careful and honest communication, mutual consent, and growth in grace and in the knowledge and love of God. All that is an amalgam of all the things you can be that we're not going to make an issue with. So even though it says fidelity in marriage and celibacy and singleness, it's not saying that's going to be the standard for everybody. That's just saying that's one of many standards that's acceptable in the United Methodist Church. So if you want to be faithful in your marriage, great, you're welcome here. If you want to be celibate when you're single, great, you're welcome here. And then the response from conservatives is supposed to be, oh, we're glad they made room for us to still follow the Bible. Thanks, guys. Thanks for letting us follow the Bible while we are continually in fellowship with all these people who are degrading themselves in the shared ministry we have by not being those things. What hasn't changed, it says. The doctrinal standards of the UMC. Articles of religion, confession of faith. The only proposed change was to add the Nicene Creed to the doctrinal standards of the denomination. 3 different items proposed this. All were overwhelmingly defeated. I think that's really a problem. It's always been a problem that the Nicene Creed is not a part of it, that there are several things Methodists do that separate them from the Church Catholic, I think. Not acknowledging the creeds is really a problem, okay? But even so, it's kind of a moot point. The Articles of Religion and the Confession of Faith, these are all considered just signposts of a previous era that are not at all binding on people. So they're just so many words. They're saying, hey, look, we kept the words in place. It's just this salutary, meaningless thing. They had words in place before that they didn't abide by. Why does this matter? 2, discernment of which marriages to conduct remains with pastors. Determination of building use, including for weddings, remains with the local church. So I think this line was blurred, and I don't know how intentional it was, but there were different legislative things adopted that made it unclear, okay, what is the final authority of trustees over the building and what's done, and what is the final authority of the pastor and what is done. I remember arguing about that in the moment and not being entirely clear. I fully expect that the Judicial Council is going to have to get involved in this. 3, the mission statement of the UMC to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world doesn't change. Y'all have heard me rant about that. It's all so many words that don't mean anything until you talk about the specific markers of discipleship. 4, adultery by clergy is a chargeable offense under the charge of immorality, as it always has been. I think that's intentionally dishonest. I think that immorality thing, to say, oh, it's always been defined that way. Well, guess what? So was gay stuff. We changed that. So why on earth would straight ways of sinning sexually still be considered grounds for dismissal? When you have clergy that talk about how worshiping Asherah is a good thing and having idols is a good thing and tarot cards is a good thing, and who've been married to people of the opposite sex and gotten divorced, like these are all signs of the times, and these people can be in good standing. And then, oh no, but we're going to maintain standards of sexual morality. We still have the charge of immorality, so we'll continue to defrog pastors that are sexually immoral. Just give me a break. There's no way that that's true. That's just lying through your teeth right there. The life-centered, not choice-centered approach to abortion and the social principles. So that'll go. I don't know. Like if you are a conservative and you're taking comfort in the UMC stance on abortion, just get ready, man. That they're frothing at the mouth to change that. 6, anything that fundamentally affects the life or ministry of the local church. Newsflash, your doctrine is at the heart of the local church's efficacy, and that's why so many local churches wanted to leave. This is just a very materialistic, biological, practical, I would say it's undergirded by like a neo-Marxist understanding of like the world. It totally speaks past the moral concerns for doctrinal fidelity and biblical truth. I find things like this so insulting to conservatives. If I was a conservative in the United Methodist Church, I would feel disrespected by this piece. And I think you should. I think they're going to continue to gaslight you and speak past you and make you feel like you're a crazy person who's judgmental and way too scrupulous. And I would just tell you, you're not. They don't think it's a big deal because their consciences are seared. They're going to have to answer to God. In the meantime, you have to figure out how you can be in right relationship with God. And anyone who's being sober knows that you can't be in a right relationship with God when you're in wrong relationship with others. Insofar as you're able to get out, if you have this same moral clarity, you got to get out. If you don't have the same moral clarity as me, stay. Stay United Methodist Church. That's where you belong, okay? But if you know that this is a problem, you got to get out. And I hope you will join me over in the Global Methodist Church. But in the meantime, don't let them gaslight you and pretend this isn't a big deal. It's a big deal, the changes they made, and they're going to continue to go in that direction, and that should bother you.